It sinks more easily. I try to write. Some of you may have read my blog, I don't know. And I love the English language, and I'm playing games with it all the time. I love its poetry. So, microbes in man, if you'll forgive me. And you have the coal tar guys, and then the arsenical drugs, you have the sulfur drugs, and penicillin. I won't list all the medical heroes who were involved in this enormously important studies. And the pharmaceutical industry, or the nascent pharmaceutical industry, is looking at this with great interest and thinking, well, we could sell these compounds because clearly they're important, and clearly a lot of people are going to use them. Penicillin is a wonderful drug. The sulfur drugs were good in their day, but very quickly, because they were being used so extensively, you see the problems of resistance appearing, and those problems have continued to this day, as I'm sure you're aware. And so the long march begins towards synthetic compounds. You start off with natural penicillin, then you have the first semi-synthetic compounds, and you move towards synthetic compounds designed to overcome resistance initially, designed in some cases to get tissue penetration. But the pharmaceutical industry loves this because now you have not natural molecules which you can't patent, but synthetic molecules which you can patent. You can ring fence them with strong intellectual protection, and then you can charge what you like. So the drug company went headlong down this road and became the overwhelmingly dominant force that they are today. Because the medical profession bought into the very same idea. This idea that if we can just find that one target, that one specific target, we can kill the microbe, maybe we can kill the disease, even if it wasn't infectious, and still save the patient. That was the idea. That was what I was told. Well, infections used to be the most important cause of illness and death. And those times may come back. Again, if you're interested in why I think that might be the case, visit my blog where I write about these kinds of issues. But at the moment, it's the chronic degenerative diseases that are by far the most important causes of morbidity and mortality. And it turns out that these are not caused by and large by microbes. They're caused by multiple metabolic errors or imbalances, and those are caused very directly by a whole range of different nutritional issues. There is no one weak link in the chain that you can target. There are multiple weak links, and what you need are not magic bullets. You need comprehensive support programs to rectify all the metabolic errors that we now know are implicated in driving so many of the chronic degenerative diseases that are important to our society now. But we stick with the pharmaceutical model because, because that's what doctors are still taught. The medical curricula are very influenced by pharmaceutical money. Why on earth would the pharmaceutical companies be interested in teaching doctors about nutritional medicine? They have no financial incentive to do that, and so they don't. Doctors are taught about drugs. That's all that I was ever taught about. And it is still, even although this model is no longer fit for purpose, even although it is basically a 19th century concept and no longer fit for purpose at all, we're stuck with it because of the vested interests of those people who control the model, who own it. So the pharmaceutical companies, the health insurance companies, this is what they like, this is how they make their earnings, and they are not going to change their position on this. Why would they? They have no interest whatsoever in encouraging more people to become healthy. At the moment, you have this very unhealthy, vicious cycle that is in place. Thank you. Just give me the water. Thank you. Excuse me. You have a food industry that is grotesquely irresponsible and sells us absolutely toxic products, and I'll explain later how toxic they are, which create vast numbers of people with chronic degenerative disease and send us running to the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry covers up the sins of the food industry. The pharmaceutical industry is delighted to have so many willing victims. That's their market. And they're happy for the food companies to continue to sell us these toxins. It's a very unhealthy and very vicious circle. And the interesting thing is, there's an enormous amount of cross-holding between the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And behind them, there's a much smaller number of financial entities. Behind them, you have Vanguard. Behind that, you have the great families. So if you ever have the feeling that we're sort of adrift in a kind of version of the matrix, powerless, working in a deeply unhealthy environment, and not having access to the tools that we need to escape from that, you'd be correct. It turns out there is an escape route. And the escape route is very simple, it's very short, and it's very easy. And that's really the main thing that I'm going to talk about today. Why is public health so bad? It's an interesting question, but it's really only interesting if we can present a few answers, a few potential answers. How bad is public health? It's terrible. Can I just ask for a show of hands? How many of you have had, or know someone in your family, or have a friend who has cardiovascular disease? That's terrible. All right, cancer. It's terrible. Dementia. Look around you. See how unhealthy we have become. If I could jump into a time machine and go back approximately 150 years in time to the period between 1850 and 1899. This is known as the mid-Victorian era, and it's one of my areas of special interest. If I asked an audience like you a question like that, there would be a few hands up. Sprinkling, maybe a dozen altogether for all of those conditions. Back in the day, those conditions were known, they did occur, they were extremely rare. In fact, we have good reason to believe that they only developed in people who had strong genetic risk factors for those conditions. And if you speak to an oncologist or a cardiologist or a neurogeriatrician and ask those specialists how many of your patients have strong genetic risk factors, the answer inevitably comes back about 10%. And if I were saying in 2025, if this was, let's say, 1885, and I asked the same questions that I just did, I'd only see 10% of the hands that you have shown today, because they lived a lifestyle that was so healthy and so protected that only people with strong genetic risk factors presented with those conditions. Everyone else was protected. We have become very exposed. You see, the nutritional tide, in a way, was high up the peak at that time. People ate a diet of no ultra-processed foods. They ate basic produce with a low calorie density, but a high nutrient density. They were physically more active than we are, so they consumed more of them. They consumed large amounts of omega-3s, polyphenols, prebiotic fibers, all the things that I think are important. And they were incredibly protected. Under those conditions, only the people with genetic risk factors became ill. What has happened to us? Why are we so much more exposed? Because the food industry has seduced us with ultra-processed foods, which are designed to be addictive. That is the basis of the food industry model. And in order to make them addictive, they have to do certain things to do with the food's preparation and formulation. It's got to be delicious. It's got to have the right taste of sweetness, and sourness, and mouthfeel, and crunch, organoleptics. It is a very advanced society. And they have designed foods successfully that are so addictive that ultra-food addiction is probably going to be included into the next version of DSM. And in fact, in North America, there are now clinics where people with ultra-processed food addiction are being routinely treated with naloxone, which, in case you don't know, is an anti-opiate antagonist. So these are foods that really seem to create addiction, something very close to addiction. It probably is addiction. We know, for example, that these foods create something called neuroinflammatory stress. And when you have neuroinflammatory stress in parts of the brain, including the hippocampus and default circuits, you are more likely to become addicted. So the fact that so many people are addicted today is not simply because of the ready availability of the neo-opioids. It's also because we are so unhealthy, we are more prone to becoming addicted than people were a century ago. We're being victimized in so many ways. So let's go back to not living in the Victorian era, but to the time of the very first national health survey that was ever carried out in the United States, and that was in 1935. In 1935, the national survey was actually quite well conducted. What they found was that in North America, in the United States, the figures in Canada and Mexico aren't so very different, there were approximately 1 in 10 adults had a chronic condition, 10%. And if you looked at younger age groups, children and adolescents, the figures were very low indeed. I said 2% question mark, and the reason for that is it's a little difficult to drill down through all the available data. I was being generous. The real figures are probably close to 1%. People used to be really healthy. It doesn't probably chime with what you know about children and adolescents today. So many of them are sick now. It didn't used to be like that. So let's come a little bit closer to the present time. Another survey was carried out in the year 2000, and between 1975 and 2000, the number of adults with a chronic condition had increased by over 4 times. Now it's almost half of the population. In 2020, that had risen to 60% of the population, and now amongst children and adolescents, that had increased dramatically from less than 1% to more than 40%. So more than 40% of children are now reporting with asthma, eczema, hypertension, fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, migraines, the list goes on, and allergies and autoimmune diseases. These never used to happen. And my medical colleagues, bless them, they see a patient who's still at school, who's presented with asthma, and they'll give that child an inhaler, and that allows the child to carry on. And the doctor thinks that they've done their job. Well, they have, sort of, but have they really? They're permitting this deeply unhealthy landscape to continue. They're applying sticking plaster to a gaping wound in the body of public health. And the problem, as I see it, is that many doctors who genuinely are trying to do the best thing that they can, working hard, working in the way that they've been trained to work, don't have enough time to look up from the endless list of patients that they're seeing, that they give, what is it, 5 minutes per patient? Is that how much it is? 6? I know it's not very much. They don't have enough time to step back from that noise to look at the bigger picture. I've had an opportunity to do that. As a result, regard the situation slightly differently. Now, because this tide of chronic degenerative disease has been rushing up the beach, you see more and more people with more than one condition. And in fact, some of these conditions increase the risk of others. There's a kind of cumulative impact. And in 1935, less than 5% of adults had more than one chronic condition. By 2018, that was 27.5%, and by 2022, 40% of the adult population now have more than one chronic condition. This is a picture of a whole population that's being poisoned. And some people say heavy metals, some people say it was yeast. Yeah, they will play a small role, but we have, I think, a better idea now of what is actually happening, which is why I'm going to start talking about. But just let me put this in graphic form. And the point I want to make here is we can't continue to go on going down this route. Medical spending continues to rise because more people are getting sick. The cost of medical treatment is increasing. We used to use small molecules, we're now using biologicals. The cost of these new drugs is phenomenal. More and more people need them. We're on the road to, if we haven't already arrived at, medical bankruptcy, which is why so many area health authorities and hospitals have reached the end of their financial tether. And they're now rationing. They have to. We can no longer afford this. Even our economy was healthy. And it isn't thanks to the stupidity and greed of our political elites. They're actually the scum of the earth, in my view, excuse me. We have been saddled with an economy that is likely in a long-term structural decline. So the medical costs are inexorably increasing. Money available to spend on healthcare is decreasing. We've arrived at what the economists know as a death cross. Something has to give. And something is giving. Medical services all up and down this country, and in every country, which has followed the similar dietary path to ours, are breaking up. So if you think you can go on living your simple ways, and I'm not saying moral about this, I mean nutritionally simple. And you get to the point as an end result where you get sick, and you think, well, that's okay because the medical profession will be there to pick up the pieces. They won't be. They won't be. It's more important than ever now that you start taking steps to look after your own health. And it's very easy to do that. But just follow this graph. In 1940, 1935 actually, 7.5% of the population. 2020, that's now 60%. If you follow that graph, by about 2050, 2055, 100% of the population is sick. Everybody is sick. We can't continue. We cannot continue. And everything that the pharmaceutical industry has done for us so far hasn't slowed this progression down. What it does is it provides extremely expensive sticking plasters to cover all the wounds. No cures. This is one particular condition that shows a very similar kind of curve. This is a huge meta-analysis, as you can see here, approximately 2.5 million patients, and it's a global meta-analysis. And what it shows is that back in 1990, approximately 1 in 5 of the world's population had what was then known as MAFLD, which is non-alcoholic related fatty liver disease, and it's now called MASLD, which is to do with metabolic imbalance. It's not. They're taking the alcohol out of the title now to save everybody's final feelings, but it just means you have fatty liver and you didn't drink because you ate the wrong foods instead. The reason why this is important is because the liver is the first organ that bears the brunt of what you eat. Whatever you put into your mouth, goes into your stomach, small intestine, it's absorbed, it passes straight to the liver. This is why the liver has been designed in the way that it has been. It is extremely good at repairing itself after it's been damaged. You can cut out half your liver and it will grow back. It's second only to the epithelial tissues in its regenerative capacity. So it's there as a buffer, as well as being a hugely important and complex metabolic focus as well. What this graph shows you is that the liver's capacity to heal is being overwhelmed. The numbers of people presenting with NAFLD or MASLD are increasing dramatically. By 2025, we are now, we're just about hitting 43%, and by 2030, we'll be hitting 50%. Now, a surprising number of these cases have progressed. They don't have MASLD, they've progressed to a steatosis. In other words, they have scarring in the liver, and a substantial number of them will progress to developing liver cancer. There's a couple of very nasty liver cancers that are at the end of this particular road. If half the population now has liver disease, and a significant fraction of those developing liver cancer, where are we going to get healthy livers to transplant into the people with liver cancer? There won't be any healthy livers yet to work with. And even if we could grow them, if we could three-dimensionally print them in vitro, we don't have enough surgeons to carry out all the surgery. This is just another example of the way in which this trajectory of increasing disease